Hello everyone, this is Darion GNB here, and welcome to another... And today we'll be taking a look at our first horror game on the channel, Evil Dead the Game. Evil Dead the Game is an asymmetrical horror experience, not too dissimilar from the likes of Dead by Daylight or the Friday the 13th game. This game revolves around you taking control of either a survivor or a Kandarian demon. You collect loot, gear, weapons, and whatever means you need to in order to defeat and banish the Kandarian demon as a survivor. And as the Kandarian demon, you are tasked with setting traps, scaring the pants off the survivors, and conjuring all sorts of things from hell in an attempt to either kill the survivors or destroy the Necronomicon. I'm going to be honest and say it's a little embarrassing that it took me this long to make a video about this game. As someone who proudly proclaims the Evil Dead series as his favorite horror franchise, you'd think I'd have been on top of this shit almost immediately. Especially if this is how I was acting from just watching the trailer. Whoa! Kelly! Funnily enough, this isn't the first time I've tried making a video about this game. Back when it was fresh and new, I whipped up a script for it a week or two later. I even recorded the thing, but I honestly wasn't satisfied with it. It felt too shallow and bare bones, so I never ended up putting it out. Not to mention, games of this style really aren't my forte. So I felt a little out of place trying to talk about it around the time. But with all the time that's passed, I've played the game almost religiously in the years that it's been receiving updates. And with all the added content and the fact that the game is pretty much dead now, I think I have a bit more to sink my teeth into and discuss with this game. Like I said, this style of games really isn't my forte. I've only played stuff like Dead by Daylight and the Friday the 13th game only a little bit before I ever got into the Evil Dead game. So obviously most of my critiques and experiences won't exactly be the same as a lot of other people who've experienced this type of game a bit more. Just wanted to keep that in mind. So with that said, let's jump into the game. Something I want to bring up about the game right off the bat is the online aspect of it. I'm not really someone who plays online games that often. I very much prefer a single-player experience, and when this game was revealed to be another wheel in the seemingly endless cog of asymmetrical online horror games, I was a little disappointed. But that did not deter me, as I am, again, a big fan of this franchise, and was ready to sink my teeth into any piece of this thing I could get my hands on. But with that said, the online aspect wasn't too bad for me, honestly. Most of the matches I ended up finding myself in were fun. Pretty well balanced for the most part, as I rarely found myself or anyone else I was playing with facing that many obstacles brought upon by unbalanced matchmaking, or anything in that similar vein. I rarely dealt with anything like that. I'll also say that this game doesn't look too bad graphically. The overall art direction I think is a bit bland, but the scenery, the character models, the cool and varied locations on the maps all look pretty good. I'll also say this game looks pretty good graphically. And I'm saying that because the other two games I mentioned before clearly didn't have high-end graphics as a major priority. They look pretty good, but it's evident when looking at those compared to this one, the devs here put a lot into the graphics, and I think they look pretty good. Now for the actual gameplay. Like I mentioned earlier, the gameplay is split between you playing as a survivor or the demon. Let's start things off with the survivors. Playing as a survivor puts you in a pretty interesting gameplay loop. You're first tasked with finding 3 pieces of a map. The map will lead you to either the Kandarian Dagger or the lost pages of the Necronomicon. You obtain both by fighting swarms of enemies for a limited number of time, and once you obtain both, you use the dagger to thwart off the Dark Ones, while the endgame sees you defending the Necronomicon from being destroyed by the demon. I think the biggest thing Survivor gameplay has going for it is the combat. In most other horror games in this fashion, playing a survivor renders you relatively helpless. As you try to scrounge for supplies and whatever, and stealthily avoid the killer and whatnot, Evil Dead the Game already brilliantly stands out by having the survivors take on a more proactive role in defeating the demon threat, by being able to knock them in the fucking teeth. Playing Survivor is so goddamn fun, man. It primarily works for me because of the game's kinda work with what you've got method to it. Because each match starts you off with nothing, and as you make your way to the various objectives, you're incentivized to explore the various nooks and crannies for ammo, loot boxes, etc. And it's really fun, because there's no way of knowing what kind of stuff you're going to get, or how beneficial it can or cannot be to your team's victory. Each match provides a wide variety of gun and melee weapons to the mix, and I think all the stuff they had in here was pretty cool. For the melee stuff, you'll get everything from swords, axes, bats, bow staves, meat tenderizers, and of course the iconic chainsaw. And like I said, being able to smack demons around with these things is a lot of fun, especially as the game gives you these finishers that are so visceral, bloody, and intense as hell. I adore how they made each one for the respective weapons feel unique. It's not like you'll be doing the same finisher with a different type of weapon each time. Each weapon provides new and cool looking sequences, and it kicks ass. And for the guns, they're separated by different types. You've got your handguns, shotguns, and what the game refers to as special weapons. This can range from crossbows, nail guns, grenade launchers, etc. And they all have their own unique types of ammunition. So you won't be able to stock up on one type of gun ammo and have that carry over to the next one you pick up. And I like the way that it was designed. The way I play, I often just try to pick up whatever type of ammo I can find, just in case I ever run out of the type of ammo for the gun I currently have equipped. Also in case any of my teammates needed any. I love how fun and creative they get with some of the weapon choices. You can literally stab demons from hell with giant cartoon syringes. It also just feels very Evil Dead. Whether it be the movies or the show, it's just fun seeing the survivors use whatever they can to fend off the Deadites. And I love how that element of the series was carried over into this game in that aspect. That ain't even the end of it, because each weapon has a leveling system, where you can find very basic weapons or more powerful versions with varying designs, and it's really fun. For the melee weapons, they just become more powerful, enough to make slicing through Deadites even easier. But for the gun weapons, on top of what I just mentioned, they also allow you to fire off more rounds than a normal kind of gun weapon, which is pretty cool. And I really appreciate how kick-ass the designs are for the different types of rare legendary weapons. They just go buck wild in designing the most creative looking designs, and I love how so many of them have this kind of thrown together look. It looks really cool. In the match, you also have an upgrading system. In the loot crates, you have the pink fuck drink from Ash vs. Evil Dead that can upgrade certain stats for your character while in the match. This element is also really fun because it adds another layer of strategy, and that you'll have to play smart with what you'll choose to upgrade, because pink fucks aren't something that you'll come across as often as some of the other little items to help you during the match. Speaking of which, the game has a bunch of cute little Easter eggs and references to the larger franchise. I already brought up pink fuck, but you also have the Shem's Cola that can heal you. Named after the term the cast and crew would use for body doubles and stand-ins when they filmed Evil Dead 1, and it's pretty cute. Not to mention other little stuff like Brujo's necklace from Ash vs. Evil Dead used as a shield in this game, and it's pretty cool. Playing as a survivor means you have a smorgasbord of characters from the Evil Dead franchise to play as, each in their own unique classes: Leader, Warrior, Hunter, and Support. In Leader, we've got Old Man Ash, Annie Nobi, Lord Arthur, Ruby Nobi, and Brock Williams. In Warrior, we've got Army of Darkness Ash, Scotty, Henry the Red, and Mia Allen. In Hunter, we've got Ash and Ed Getley from Evil Dead 2, as well as Kelly Maxwell and Amanda Fisher from Ash vs. Evil Dead. And finally, in Support class, we have Evil Dead 1 Ash, Cheryl Williams, Pablo Simon Bolivar, David Allen, and the Blacksmith from Army of Darkness. A lot of these characters like Brock, Ruby, the Allen twins, Amanda, and the Blacksmith were added in as DLC post-launch. I gotta say, this wasn't a bad lot to pick from the franchise. You have no goddamn idea how happy I was seeing Kelly and Pablo return to the franchise. Or, well, I guess you kinda do since I showed you earlier. But regardless, I was so goddamn happy seeing them here. They also were really funny to pull each Ash from the previous installments here, but it was really smart in how they separated them by class. Unfortunately, due to the game not receiving any more support, we're likely to never get folks like Chet or Ash's daughter Brandy in here. Which is a shame, because I would have preferred those guys over someone like the Blacksmith, but that's just me. Their roles in each of these classes go as follows. Leaders have a better handle on their fear, another important mechanic I'll go over in a bit, as well as boosting the stats of your teammates. Warriors are really efficient in melee combat, Hunters are more efficient with gun weapons, and Support helps keep other players' fear level down or provide more heals and stuff like that. Each character also has a unique and special move to use during the match. These vary from giving you flame swords, putting down a healing pad for you and your surrounding teammates, being able to exorcise the demon from possessing someone, or just having unlimited ammo for a brief period. These little moves are fun, but some are more useful than others. Other characters like Brock or the Blacksmith I haven't played much with, probably because I'm still bitter that we don't have Chet or Brandy in this game, but whatever. So I don't really know what the hell those two do. Either way, I think the system was just really fun and adds to the Survivor gameplay immensely. Another mechanic to look out for while playing the Survivor is to keep a good handle on your fear. In a match, you'll see this little bar underneath your health. This is your fear level, and the more scared you are, the more susceptible you are to being possessed by the demon player. Not to mention, it's just easier for them to find you that way, which can either fuck up your whole run or just annoyingly slow down your progress. This is another really fun mechanic for me, as it just adds more to the horror experience of the game. While you're roaming certain areas or slaying deadites, you'd be wise to find a campfire or any light source, so as to make your fear go down. And yeah, I think this is really cool. The game also has a skill tree for every character, and, before the game died, you'd get skill points after beating each match. The skill points would be used in the skill tree, and might I say, this shit is pretty complex. If you're a maniac like me who never mains a single character and wants to be a jack of all trades, you'll spend quite a while grinding up to get these. Or at least you would if the game wasn't dead. But to me, they are pretty worth it because the skills you can acquire can be really useful in matches. They range from increasing stamina, durability, attack potency, increasing how much you can heal and how many items you can carry, and stuff like that. But if you upgrade your character to a certain point, they'll get little bonuses, like automatically starting off a match with a chainsaw, or a protective amulet if you're Pablo, or various buffs you can receive in the midst of combat. Like I said, playing Survivor is a ton of fun. Lots of fun characters to play, all feeling unique and different, a pretty addicting gameplay loop with super fun and engaging combat, great sense of exploration, and an interesting skill tree and progression system. Now for the game's other half, and part of the reason why I've taken so long to review this game. On top of me not being satisfied with my original script for this review, I often felt hesitant to talk about it, because there's a whole other half of the game's gameplay that I've barely experienced. Yeah, when playing this game, I was very much maining the Survivor characters. Mainly because I'm always going to want to play as the hero characters I love in this series, as opposed to taking control of a disembodied force that can only transform into notable villains from the series sometimes, and for a brief period of time. Keep in mind, that's not me knocking down the demon gameplay, I'm just explaining why I've barely touched that half of the game. I've only played as the demon a handful of times, and I was never as good at it as I am with the survivors. So I really put all of my focus into that. However, that doesn't mean I don't have anything to say about playing as the demon. It'll just be much less than what I had to say about the survivors. Like I mentioned a second ago, playing as the Kandarian demon has you take control of a disembodied force, the one that chases our characters throughout the various entries of the franchise, with who I think is meant to be Deadite Linda scolding you and leading you to defeating the survivors. Your goal is to set traps, summon hordes of Deadites, or possess the survivors in order to kill them or destroy the Necronomicon. You float around and collect infernal energy in order to upgrade your stats, much like in the Survivor gameplay. I guess my main issue with playing as the demon is how much farming you have to do in order to do the really fun stuff, like possessing the boss demon or setting the various traps and stuff. Not to mention, actually having to set out and find the survivors, I remembered being a bit of a pain for me in a few runs, especially with how gigantic the maps are. It's worth noting that it's never impossible, but it can often take a while. They'll either drive around in a car nearby, or make some noise in the general area, which can tip you off on where to go. A strat I remember doing was collecting enough infernal energy and making my way to the Kandarian dagger and Necronomicon spots on the map to set various traps and stuff so as to give the survivors a harder time when they get there. But this proved not to always work in my favor. Sometimes it'd help, but other times I'd just be fucking around while the survivors upgrade themselves to be leagues ahead of my dumbass. When you really get into it, it is fun playing as the demon. Being such a mischievous little shit and messing with the survivors is really cool. Trapping certain loot boxes with the mini Ashes or Ash's severed hand is always fun, on top of being able to take away certain resources like ammo and stuff, which is just a bigger fuck you to the survivor. Catching up to them and throwing these little fucked up surprises their way is just a great deal of fun. You can summon a few Deadites to throw the survivors off, but this does come with a cooldown timer. So as to not to make the demon too powerful, which is fair, but it's another one of those things that just turned me off from coming back to play as the demon. You can possess the survivors to either kill their teammates or just hinder their progress even more. And this is pretty cool. Wasting their ammo, bringing them into the Death Storm thing. Seriously, what the fuck is this shit? I think being able to possess the cars is my favorite part of this whole thing. Because you'll have these guys race to get to their objective, hop in their car and start pulling off, only to have it completely taken away and just zoom it off to God knows where. On top of survivors and cars, you can even possess and briefly control your Deadite soldiers, which is pretty fun. I think some of the controls can be a bit finicky, which is why I wasn't always too enthusiastic to possess them. How strong your possessions are and how long they last can entirely depend on what level you are when you perform this stuff. Playing the demon, for me, is a game of patience and strategy. The whole game is pretty strategic, but it's even more so playing as the demon. If you're somebody who's better at taking their time and properly planning out this sort of gameplay style, you'll probably get a kick out of this. But for me, I just didn't favor it much compared to the Survivor gameplay. Again, I'm sorry if this bit was a little short, but there wasn't that much for me to say. Playing as the demon allows you to take control of various villains from throughout the series, each in their own class. In Necromancer class, we have Evil Ash from Army of Darkness with his skeletal forces. In Puppeteer, we have Elegos from Ash vs. Evil Dead. Warlord class has Henrietta Nobi, as well as standard Deadites as her minions. In Plaguebringer class, we have the Witch from Army of Darkness, as well as other Deadite and skeletal goons. And in Schemer class, we have Ball from Ash vs. Evil Dead and his skinless minions. I think this was a missed opportunity to have his and Ruby's kids be enemies in the game. I would have liked to have seen those guys represented, instead of that random cop lady he skinned. The latter two were added much later after launch. This is once again a really cool set of characters to put a spotlight on. Schemers are efficient in trap placement and stuff, Plaguebringers deal more poison-based damage and attacks, Warlord class has the demon forces be buffed with increased damage, and Necromancer can summon these skeleton flute players that can increase the demon's damage in the midst of combat. Again, I don't have much to say about how these various systems really operate, because I haven't played much of them, but I still felt like they were worth mentioning. All the models for these characters look really good. They did a good job capturing the various likenesses of the actors and stuff, which is cool. The game also has a bunch of really cool skins for them. Another missed opportunity to not have the future Ash from Ash vs. Evil Dead as a skin, but whatever. I absolutely adore this outfit for Kelly right here. I'd imagine her wearing something like this in the apocalyptic future we saw at the end of Ash vs. Evil Dead. So if that animated Evil Dead project actually does go through, and it actually does focus on the apocalyptic future and all that stuff, I would love to see Kelly wear this outfit. It just looks badass. The skins for the demon characters, though, also look really cool. Elagos in this ice form looks sick as fuck, and Evil Ash decked out in golden armor just goes so damn hard. The game has 3 maps for you to play across, Remington Rapids being the woodsy area, and more notably being the map that has the iconic Nobi cabin. Cleaver County, which is just more woods and suburban-like areas, and finally the Army of Darkness map, which was later added post-launch. The design and scope of these maps is really commendable. It's so fun running around and exploring these vast areas, and it's also just really satisfying to walk around the Nobi cabin or Castle Kandar with these crisp as hell graphics. I think this is where Annie stabbed Jake. A level of detail I always loved about the Army of Darkness map in particular is if you go out and find a car, instead of it sitting there like they do in the other 2 maps, the devs added in this effect where the car just poofs out of the sky, almost as if it's being pulled through time and space, and it's really cute. I don't think the devs needed to go and add that level of detail, but I'm glad they did, because it builds a sense of immersion. It's a shame we never got Elk Grove as a place to visit in one of these maps, or just straight up as its own map. That was like the main setting for 2 whole seasons of the TV show, and it sucks they never added it in here. While it may get repetitive to roam around the same maps over and over again, the structure of the game never makes roaming around these spots feel stale. Not to mention, they change certain conditions of the map for each match. It'll either be rainy, or stormy, or snowy, or bright and sunny, or just rain blood. That's always fun. It's not much, but it does add more to the game that spices up the visuals. There's no better combination in life than crisp white snow drenched in cartoonish amounts of blood. Truly beautiful. Another thing worth noting is the atmosphere the game provides for these maps. While this game is very action-oriented, it is still a horror game, and the horror element is greatly showcased, especially in these maps. I don't know what it is, but roaming around these areas gives off a bit of an unsettling vibe. It might be due to the music, which I'll go over in a bit, but running around these areas with this calm music playing, hearing nothing but the rustling of the leaves and twigs around you, not knowing when or if a deadeye will pop up and smack you in the ass, I really love the atmosphere this game provides. It's not the scariest thing ever, but it is done well enough to be worth noting. As far as some of the other modes and content the game has to offer besides the online survivor and demon gameplay, there is a single-player mode where you'll be joined by 3 survivor bots and face off against a demon bot, and this was handled pretty well. My AI teammates didn't cause too much trouble for me in the matches I've had. There are bits where some aren't responsive or get stuck somewhere, so that can be a pain in the ass, but you'll be more likely to experience that stuff far less than a normal run, at least from my experience. There's also another mode where you can play online with 3 other players against an AI demon bot. There unfortunately isn't a single player mode for you to play as the demon, which is something I'd been hoping they would implement since launch. If that existed, it would have given me more of an opportunity to naturally get a grip on the demon gameplay. Friday the 13th had a system where you can hunt down AI survivors, so I don't know why it couldn't be done here. The game also offers an exploration mode, where you're free to explore the various maps without dealing with the game's objectives and stuff. And this is pretty neat. Gives you a chance to see all of what the maps have to offer. And the game tosses in a few deadites so you won't be just doing nothing while you're roaming around the place. You can set up private matches for you and your friends, which is cool. There's also quick matches in Splatter Royale. two modes I have next to no experience with because by the time they were added, I'd kind of moved on to other stuff. And when I tried to play them to prepare for this video, it takes freaking forever to start up a match. So after a while, I just said fuck it and did a round in single player. Not to mention, both of these things were added pretty late into the game's life cycle, and you can tell ones like quick matches were made to try and bring more players back in, because the thing that it tries to pull you in with is that you can get more skill points to upgrade your characters and stuff, which highlights another major problem with this game that I'll go over in just a bit. Something else I wanted to bring up is that the game can be bugged up the ass sometimes. It was never too prevalent whenever I played it, but every now and then, certain button commands wouldn't respond properly, which can often cause unnecessary problems in a match. Certain things with the character models get weird, or the vehicles just don't know how to fucking vehicle properly. The game also provides these single-player missions, where you'll either recreate events from the movies and TV show, or have all new original objectives to do around the map. Mission 1 has you take control of Evil Dead 2 Ash and bury Linda's remains, while fighting hordes of Deadites. Mission 2 has you play as Old Man Ash, try to throw a party for some teens who stole the Delta. Mission 3 is just beating up a bunch of demons playing as Army of Darkness Ash. Mission 4 has Pablo search for Ash while fighting off Elagos and his army. Mission 5 centers around Lord Arthur trapped in the present day and finding the means to get back to his own time. Mission 6 actually centers around the remake characters David and Mia, and sees the former try to free the latter from their demon affliction after taking a weekend trip to the Nobi cabin. Mission 7 sees Henry the Red defend Castle Kandar from the Plaguebringer Witch, and Mission 8 sees Kelly hunting down the demon Elagos. These missions honestly might be the most frustrating part of the game for me, for a variety of reasons, but it mostly has to do with the fact that they don't have checkpoints. If you die in these missions, you'll have to start all the way from the beginning, which is just so damn tedious. They rarely give you that many items and resources to use in these missions, so it's very easy to get killed in these. And it's made even worse taking into consideration that these missions are pretty lengthy. They last like 10, 15, 20 minutes on average, and having to do all that progress over again is really freaking tedious. And it's made even worse because these are practically required to play if you want to get characters like Pablo, Old Man Ash, or Lord Arthur. I don't know why they never implemented checkpoints into these things. Even if each mission had just one checkpoint, I think it would have made a big enough difference. And another thing I find frustrating is that these could have been really good and fun parts of the game if they were implemented properly. It would have been neat to have more missions where you just do whatever with the dozens of characters they've put in here. While I doubt there's any serious story potential for any of these, it would have been really fun to have one centered around Ruby or Brock or something like that. As someone who enjoys single-player experiences far more than online stuff, I can't help but see this stuff as wasted potential. Alongside all of those, there are also Professor Raymond Nobi's tapes for you to listen to, which more or less gives little insights on lore and stuff, junk that someone like me eats right the hell up. It's so cool to hear the Nobis discover the remains of the battle from Army of Darkness.
I believe we have uncovered clear evidence of the distinct combination of sulfur, carbon, and potassium nitrate unique to modern gunpowder.
Until now, gunpowder was believed to have been in use only in China and the Middle East during this time period. We found residue on arrowheads and a payload that appears to have been fired from a catapult. Remarkable discoveries.
Some others go into Annie finding the lost pages of the Necronomicon, Professor Nobi trying to protect himself from dead-eyed Henrietta. Nobi for some reason tapes that one time he tried to take the demon spirit out of Henrietta and put it into one of his college students. And it's funny how they tried to incorporate that bit of lore into this because in that moment in the show, Nobi is shown to be an evil piece of shit. And the game keeps that intact with this tape, but the following one tries to paint him in a more sympathetic light, and it just doesn't work. And I think this retroactively made me dislike that certain direction in Ash vs. Evil Dead, but that's a discussion for another time. These tapes, interestingly, are the only bit of the game that details the plot. Yeah, this game surprisingly does have a story element, even if it is very minor. In these tapes, you hear Professor Nobi attempt to summon Ash to help him deal with Henrietta, but instead, he's pulling in all the characters that are connected to Ash in some way. Henry the Red, Kelly and Pablo. The only outliers are Mia and David, but I just chalked that up to them being sucked in because they were connected to the Necronomicon or something like that. Until he, presumably, pulls in 4 Ashes from different points in time. This is honestly a really neat and fun idea, and it's really disappointing they didn't have a campaign that centered around this stuff. The voice acting in this game I thought was pretty solid. I like that they brought back as many of the previous actors as they could for their respective characters. I probably wouldn't enjoy Pablo and Kelly being back as much if they weren't voiced by Santiago and De Lorenzo in this game. Their line deliveries are a bit flat at points, like they're phoning it in a bit. I think that's more to do with the direction, because the random one-off things the characters say in the midst of gameplay and stuff doesn't need to be Oscar-worthy. Not to mention, when they have other lines in the game, they do sound pretty good.
Ash, el jefe, the savior of mankind. I'm el brujo especial, so you got close, but you want Ash.
Pablo, less yapping and more weapon finding. This place is surrounded.
I'm fully loaded.
It's sweet they brought back Ellen Sandwise as Cheryl, as well as Lucy Lawless as Ruby. Bruce Campbell absolutely kills it as Ash. This ain't the first time Campbell's done voice work for the boomstick butcher with the chainsaw hand, and hopefully it won't be the last, because his charm and charisma as Ash just oozes with every line for me. The newer actors they got for the other characters are doing a decent job. It would have been cooler to have voices that could do better impressions of certain characters. It's weird not having someone who sounds even a little bit similar to Joel Tobeck or Lee Majors as Ball and Brock Williams. But the guys they got did a passable job. The music in this game, however, did anything but disappoint. The title theme goes so goddamn hard. I wish future movies would implement a style like this into its score, because it just feels perfectly on brand for Evil Dead. The music that plays when you're roaming around the map and stuff is so eerie and really builds a chilling atmosphere. The battle music kicks ass as well. There's not much I can say, honestly. It just sounds really good. The last two single-player missions also gave us two original songs, and they're both cool as hell. Burn Them Down as the battle theme for Henry the Red's mission, and Take Control for Kelly's mission. And like I said, they're both sick as hell. Overall, Evil Dead the game is a fun ride. Visually and graphically, it looks great. The combat and exploration in Survivor mode is immensely addicting, and while my experience with the demon was limited, it was still very enjoyable. The mechanics and controls felt well designed, both gameplay styles feel relatively balanced and fair to play. The upgrade and skill tree system I think were really well implemented. Not to mention, the music goes hard as hell. The game has its fair share of bugs, but I don't think it's something that'll mess up the experience that often. The only major negative I can give is at the end of it all, there isn't much content besides the main Demon vs. Survivor modes. And while those are two things that I think were handled fairly well, it also feels a tad limiting. Especially now that the game will no longer be receiving any support. Which leads me to my next issue.
It's really hard for me to recommend this game to someone now that it's not receiving any updates. And it's also pretty embarrassing to admit that I didn't know that the game was digitally delisted. So the only way for you to play the game is to get your hands on a physical copy, and play it while you can until they inevitably shut the servers down at some point. And the game ultimately over time just kind of becomes lost media, I guess. The content we have in here is really fun, but not many people are going to really experience the cooler aspects of this game. Like I mentioned earlier, it takes a while to get a match started, because barely anyone is playing the game anymore. Which means barely anyone is going to be able to experience the demon gameplay properly, because there's no single-player mode for that. Not to mention people won't be able to do things with the skill tree, and upgrade the characters and all of that, because you get spirit points by playing online. If not many people are able to play online, then not many people are able to do all of that cool stuff. And it's honestly just a shame. As it stands now, if you buy Evil Dead the game today, you'll have annoying-ass solo missions to play, maybe some hopes of getting into online matches, but that's not a guarantee, and a single-player mode where you play against a demon bot with bot teammates. Which isn't bad, but I don't think that alone would be worth the price of admission.
I'd only recommend this game to a specific group of people if you're an Evil Dead fan and you have other friends who are Evil Dead fans. If you're someone who likes asymmetrical horror games like that of Dead by Daylight, you'd probably be better off spending your money elsewhere. But if you're a longtime fan of the series or a newcomer, like if you get into the franchise from Evil Dead Rise or Evil Dead Burn or stuff like that, and you just want a little bit more content to sink your teeth into, I don't think this would be a bad thing to get. That way you can kind of experience the online play and how that works out for you, and do stuff with the skill tree and whatnot. Something I'll always take away from this game, however, is that it was undoubtedly made with love. This game was packed to the brim with cool and interesting Easter eggs, neat little lore additions, and a charm that really feels right at home with this franchise. As a whole, it just nearly perfectly captured the essence of Evil Dead, and I'll always appreciate how it pulled that off. Hopefully with how popular Evil Dead is continuing to be with the movies that we're getting, and that potential animated project that was rumored to be a thing, hopefully it means at some point we could get another Evil Dead game that's more geared towards single-player experiences. I hear the new Halloween game is attempting something like that, and I hope the success of that game could potentially pave the way for more horror games in that style that does a variation of that asymmetrical horror gameplay mode, but also has a single-player experience to go along with it. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GNB, and take care.